Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast. I am your host, Zach Bitter. I have an exciting announcement to make. I am offering a chance to win a free 30-minute consultation with me. Entering is very simple. Just share an episode on any social media platform, tag me, or send a screenshot to hpopodcast@gmail.com. This is important because if you don't tag share with me, I may not see it and be able to enter you in the raffle. You can enter as many times as you want. There will be a winner announced during the show intro at the beginning of each month. I appreciate all the listeners who have participated in this so far. It really does go a long way in helping me grow the show when you share the episodes you like with your friends, family, and followers. Also, a new way to enter the raffle is to submit a show review on your favorite podcast platforms. This month's winner is Christy. She actually won with an Instagram submission on her profile, which is at Christy Runs Cali. Christy, I will reach out to you on Instagram to set up your 30-minute consultation. Other ways to support the show is you can head to the show landing page, which is just zachbitter.com/HPO. There you will be able to find access to the show Patreon page where you can actually access shows early and ad-free by subscribing to the show on Patreon. You can also donate in other ways on that landing page, as well as access the full catalog of episodes, descriptions, show notes, and transcripts if you're interested in diving into some of the previous episodes. I do want to give a quick shout out to my Endurance Training Simplified series of episodes. It's gotten quite long, so I listed them in the show notes. You can link to each one of those there, but if you're looking to start your endurance journey or just really fine tune it, I have a whole series of episodes that deal with just training principles in general and the different components that go into it between like easy running, speed work with short intervals, long run development, the mental side of training, all sorts of different stuff. So check those out in the show notes if you're interested in refining your endurance training. If you'd like a little bit of extra support in your training, I'm actually launching a new coaching package. So this new one is actually a group training process that is online. What it is if you subscribe to it, you will get access to my full catalog of pre-made endurance plans, which range from 5K up to 100-mile, come in multiple levels and multiple different durations. And you have access to that as long as you're subscribed. So if you decide to train for a specific distance or event, all you got to do is let me know, and I send you the copy of that particular training program. But what comes with it is what is important, in my opinion, is when you're subscribed to this new group coaching package, you will also be able to attend a weekly meeting with me and the other group members where we will cover topics that I find important for your endurance training journey, as well as questions and schedule adjustments that you have submitted beforehand, and then also some live questions from the group. The group size is going to be limited to 30 though, so make sure you sign up soon because I will be starting this program before the end of 2023 to make sure people have access to this by the start of the new year. You can find information on that by just heading to my website at zachbitter.com or linking to it in the show notes. Supporting the show this year are my friends at Element Electrolytes and Delta G Ketones. I have full descriptions about how I use both of these products in my training and racing at the end of the show. So if you're interested in checking that out, please stick around after this episode. For now, just some discounts and promotions from both of these products. Element Electrolytes is offering a free sample pack with your first purchase. Just go to drinklmnt.com/HPO. They have a no questions asked money back guarantee if you are unsatisfied. They also just released their warm beverage winter collection, which now includes raspberry chocolate. I just checked it out. It will be in my morning coffee protocol this winter. Delta G Ketone is the exogenous ketone company that has almost all of the research behind its formula. They are trusted by professionals around the world. You can get 20% off with code BITTER20. Just go to deltagketones.com. There you can also sign up for a free consultation where they will help you understand how their product may fit best in your lifestyle, and then you can compare it to mine. Links to both of these products can be found in the show notes, as well as the show sponsor landing page, which is zachbitter.com/HPO sponsors. How are you feeling after? I guess you've had a little over a week to kind of recover, so I'm guessing your legs are probably starting to bounce back a bit.
Yeah, the legs are okay. The head is not that good. I think it's a combination between jet lag and the race.
Yeah. Yeah. How long were you in the States before the race?
I came in Tuesday before, so
Okay.
but I think
So you didn't have too much time to acclimate.
no, I think it was a good thing because I was pretty um, not so sleepy in the morning, so I think it was a good thing for the race. I was like, it was easy to get up early and eat breakfast and do my thing. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was fun to watch the race this year because for one, you had reached out to me a little bit before just kind of asking about the course itself because I think you had your eyes on doing something flat and fast in the 100-mile distance, and I've been on that course a couple times. So when you reached out, I was really excited because I've been following your career and met you at World Championships for the 100K in the past. And I was like, I've been confident that the Tunnel Hill 100 mile is a sub 11 and a half hour course. And I'm just was waiting for someone to show up and do it.
yeah,
I've given it a shot a couple times, but I haven't had a day that would get close enough to sub 11 and a half. But when you said you were signing up, I was like, Elov might be the man for the job. This could be an interesting one. So I got following the race and was just excited to see kind of the splits play out over the course of the day. So I mean, today I want to chat to you about Tunnel Hill 100, what went into the training for that, the race itself, but also just kind of your entire career as an ultra marathon runner, because I think as the sport gets more competitive, it gets more and more difficult to be somebody who kind of enjoys the full offerings of what the sport has, from the mountains to the roads to the tracks and all that stuff. And you've been somebody who has done quite well at dabbling in a variety of different stuff, and I'm always interested to hear from people like that who don't just necessarily focus on one aspect of the sport.
yeah, it will be a fun conversation. I think it has been a wild ride.
No doubt, no doubt. I have to ask you too. I think the first time we met in person was at the World Championship 100K 2016 in Spain, and I remember that one and Sweden's team specifically because after the race, the Team Sweden and Team USA, we went out and indulged in some of the fine wine and cheese that was offered in Spain, and had a good time both on the course as well as after the course. So I remember you were on that team. I believe that was your first 100K championships. Am I right about that, or had you done it before then?
Yeah, it was the first year I did flat 100, and I got in the world champs team the same year, and managed to do pretty good, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I was looking at your world championship performances, and that was actually one of the reasons why I was excited to see what you would do at Tunnel Hill, because just looking at kind of how the trends went with that, you had some good performances where you were like 10th or just outside the top 10th and running in kind of the mid to high 6 hour range. And then this last previous championships, you went there and moved up a bit, finished seventh with a 6.5 hour 100K, which in my mind, a 6.5 hour 100K is suggestive of having the potential to, dip under 11.5 hours for sure on a course like Tunnel Hill. And my next question always with that is, okay, there is a big enough difference between a flat 100K and a flat 100 mile where you can be a really good 100K runner, and if you don't know how to execute a flat 100-mile course, that your skills may work against you to some degree because you can get out a little too aggressively and they just pay dearly. And on a course like Tunnel Hill, where you have that slight uphill on the out and back, the second out and back, you come down that to finish. So if you have legs, you can come flying down that last spot. And that was the part where I misstepped in 2018, is I didn't give myself enough legs really to really take advantage of that downhill at the end and gave back a fair bit of time. So what I wanted to do is look at what your splits looked like when you ran 6.5 hours of 100K and just gauge, is Elov going to be the guy who's going to be conservative enough early on to make this happen? Or is he going to be the guy who goes out so fast in the beginning that he pays for it dearly at the end? And your splits at World 100K were about as good as I've ever seen at 100K championships in terms of being fairly close to even between 50K, first 50K and second 50K. I mean, that race always gets out fast, so you're probably going to have a slight positive split just to be kind of in it, so to speak. But I was really impressed with your splits as how you arrived at 6.5 hours. And I was thinking to myself, if Elov paces himself right, that first 50 miles, it's going to be exciting to see what he can do the second half. Talk to me a little bit about just strategy with these flat races. Do you have a pacing strategy that you tend to kind of look at when you're deciding how to kind of put yourself out there?
I look both on the pacing. It depends on how good the training has been, how my confident in pacing is, and but I also try to look how I feel in the pacing during the race, because in 100 I don't want to go too fast, but it should be a bit fast. I think it's still like it's not that far, but it's far. Like, are you going out too fast? Your legs can uh, like be trash after halfway. Like, so I try to find the perfect spot, where I can not lose too much in the end, and even more so in the 100 miles, because it's another 60K. So you have to have that endurance. But this time it's maybe the second time I try to run faster at 100 miles. And this time it's actually the first time when I focused on it for a longer time, like really building up for it. So uh, I got into it like I really want to try to feel really uh, relaxed for a very long time during this race. So that was my aim goal, to really feel relaxed, just do my thing with nutrition, and like build up mile after mile, like consistency, and not doubt myself that I can run this fast. Like,
Hmm. Yeah, the confidence to be able to stick it is definitely a part of it because I think of it as like you have this, you're dealing with two batteries, your physical battery and your mental battery. So if you doubt yourself and in your mind you're constantly second guessing what could be an appropriate effort, that could become problematic because you can just wear yourself out mentally from just stressing out essentially about not being able to do it. So coming in with the confidence that you think you can actually hit the paces you're looking at makes it a lot more manageable on that mental side of things. Um, I'd like to hear about kind of the mental approach that you took for the race itself, but I do also want to rewind a little bit and just, since you mentioned it, talk a little bit about your training as far as preparing for the Tunnel Hill 100 mile. When did you decide I'm going to begin a training cycle for a flat 100 miler? And once you did you have like a strategy at which you were going to kind of employ throughout the training in terms of like benchmarks you were going to try to hit or specific workouts you wanted to do that would suggest you would be ready?
yeah, I think I decided to go for Tunnel Hill. Maybe it was right before Ultravasan this year. So it's was in maybe early August. I decided. So I had an Ultravasan 90K uh, in maybe 20th of August, uh, and then I was like, see where how much my body took a damage from that, and then start building up for this race. Uh, I got really sore from comrades this year, so I don't think I really got in shape for Ultravasan in time. So I didn't really get all out on that day. So just the second weeks off after that race, I felt like I can start training right now. Not to too much, but this weekend I can do like 120k, and then starting to build up towards higher mileage. Uh, so I had a plan. I counted the weeks before Tunnel Hill, and I considered I can do 3 blocks with 3 weeks, where I can put 2 high mileage weeks and one a little bit lower. So that was my aim strategy, to do like 3 weeks blocks, uh, to push it a little bit, and then uh, uh, recover for 1 week, to have also have the mental capacity during the training to like push it a little bit. Uh, I think my sweet spot is between maybe 180 to 210 kilometers a week. Much more of I think it's it tends to be maybe a little bit too much. But my high mileage week was between 170 to 100 213 kilometers.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds high and reasonable to me. I think the part where people go wrong with mileage like that is they don't back off of it at all. And then they find themselves doing that on such a frequent basis versus it sounds like you kind of listen to your body and work up to it, peak at that, and then probably taper a little bit as you're kind of getting closer to the event. So you're able to make something that would maybe be unsustainable in the long term, sustainable in the short term in order to get a race in. And then it's about just kind of nailing that recovery piece to the puzzle after the race itself. So you can correct me if I'm wrong about any of that in your particular experience, because I know you've been around long enough to know kind of the ins and outs of going into one training cycle and the next.
Yeah.
Did you do any sort of speed work during those higher mileage weeks, or is that something you typically address earlier in the training?
I had, especially during my high mileage weeks, I did maybe one interval session a week, uh, maybe with half marathon intensity during like 1K intervals. So just one interval session a week. Otherwise, it was just more or less distance running, maybe, and one long run, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was looking at your Strava just to kind of see some of the stuff that you were doing to prepare before this interview, and it did look like you had come on a couple things that stuck out. One, or a few things actually. One was consistent volume at the intensity that you were going to be targeting at Tunnel Hill, which was in that kind of mid to high 6 minute range. Then there was that kilometer repeat, which looked like it was probably around your threshold intensity. So I mean, half marathon for you is probably about threshold, somewhere in that neighborhood, I would guess. And then a long run. And it looked like a pretty good blend of workouts. The one thing I wanted to ask you about is when you're doing your long run for something like 100 mile, is there a number you're typically targeting for that or a time duration? I always find it to be an interesting question for ultra marathon runners because they're sort of like the traditional long run that we're looking for from like an adaptation standpoint. But then you get these long races like 100 miles where like there's probably some reason to go beyond that at times just to work on things like gear, nutrition, pacing, and everything like that. How do you go about structuring your long run development?
Uh, I think it's easier for the 100 mile. The 100 mile pace is better for the long runs because it's not that fast to do for maybe 65k. Uh, but if you're doing that for 100k, it's not. It's easier to do too much of the 100k speed. I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, and my strategy was to do the longest long runs well enough before the race, so I didn't get. So it was a positive thing, not a negative thing, too close to the race. So I try to get to the longest long runs a little bit early on, and then focus more of getting the feel for the speed, and like just keep on building a little bit, and try to nail the race, like feeling wise.
Yeah. And the paces you were hitting too, it is one of those things where you really don't have opportunities to walk if you're going to average what ends up being something in, like, I think it was your pace was like a 6:51 per mile or something like that. I mean, that's fast enough where, like, if you find yourself walking, you're giving yourself a huge hurdle to get over because you're going to have to make up for that with faster pacing stuff. So it's one of those things where I just think when those scenarios present themselves, having a cumulative volume over time at the intensity that you're going to have to run for that 100 miles becomes kind of that biggest target. So whether you do a 65-kilometer long run or a 45-kilometer long run, it's probably more important to think about which one of those is going to impact your overall volume at the intensity you need to sustain for the duration of that 100-miler. And then the one that probably wins out is the one where you can get more volume by the end of the day over the course of the plan versus the one that kind of steals from future volume. So it is interesting to hear you talk about doing that longer long run earlier in the cycle so that you wouldn't necessarily step on the training that would be most pivotal for the race itself.
Yeah.
So you get to Tunnel Hill. Last year, they had terrible weather at Tunnel Hill. So were you worried at all that there was like going to be a potential that you did all this work and flew over from Sweden and you get a bunch of snow or anything like that?
Yeah, we saw that, and just hoping for the best, and it got we got a really perfect day, I think. Yeah.
And the thing, I think we talked about this a little bit actually on Instagram. I was last year was the exception. I think almost every year at Tunnel Hill, it's just like what you had this year. So I tell people you should probably bank 9 out of 10 times you're going to get what you had versus something similar to last year. So I was happy that it ended up playing out that way and I didn't mislead you at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy too.
Yeah. Okay. So you get out there on race day, weather's perfect. You probably know at that point that's not going to be a variable you have to be concerned with. The race starts. What is your thought going in that first out and back? Because I always find that one interesting because it's about a marathon. It's the first chance you get to kind of come back through the start finish line. You've got enough miles in your legs where you're probably starting to be able to piece together like how aggressive you have been so far versus how conservative, or kind of where on that spectrum of conservative to aggressive you're starting to kind of feel things out. Where were you at mentally when you kind of came through that section?
I felt really strong for the day. It was a bit of a chilly morning. I don't know what in Fahrenheit, but I felt a little bit cold in my hands, and I used arm sleeves and gloves until the marathon mark before I took them off, and the temperature was going up. But I felt really chill during that first marathon. I was just like, this feels so great. I feel perfect. The speed is perfect. I found myself in a perfect pace, and after the marathon, I just like the first uphill that you talk about, up to Tunnel Hill, was I was thinking of that like I can let the pace go down a little bit on the uphill, and then let the pace go up in the downhill. Not too much, but enough that I like get the pace back from the uphill running. If it not if I don't need too much speed. So I try to weigh that in, how fast I could go downhill. But yeah, I think I nailed that first loop pretty good. And I really think it was interesting when I started to come closer to 100k, and like it felt like I was going faster and faster one time. Like,
Mm-hmm. So you felt like kind of the momentum was picking up for you a little bit versus feeling like you were kind of starting to wear thin.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. I know there were some other guys in the race that were also targeting some fast times that day, and it seemed, at least from the live tracker, that you took the lead early on, but maybe not by like a large margin or anything. So there were some guys in the early stages that were kind of just behind you. Were you aware of that or thinking about that at all, or was it just like, I know what effort I need to dial up, whether I'm in the lead or in third place doesn't matter to me, because if I nail this, my time is going to be what it is?
uh, I know. I have met the guys before the race who I knew were going for fast times. I met Reese. I ran with Reese. I can't say his last name, but and Phil Young. I say hey hi
Mm-hmm.
to, and Taggart I knew was going out fast. So when I at the first turnaround, I said hey to them, and like I knew who was going for the 100 miles. So uh, I was checking the time at the turnarounds, how far behind they were. So I knew. I think I had the race in control all the time, uh, and it wasn't until after halfway I saw that the they started to fade a little bit. But otherwise, they were pretty close. I think. I think they were like 8 minutes behind in halfway, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to say that at the halfway point, you were maybe around 6 minutes ahead of Taggart. And then it was interesting because they had video feeds of both of you guys coming through. And I mean, perception through a video camera can only tell you so much. But of the people coming through, you definitely looked kind of the most smooth and focused and the less kind of like, I would say, anxious about everything. So at that point, I was thinking to myself, like, I think Elov probably knows what he's doing here. You didn't go out so fast that first 50 miles where it was suggestive that you were going to blow up or something like that. So it was kind of fun to pay attention to that. Did you pair that with any information? Because my guess is your splits from the 50-mile mark to 100K and then making that turnaround would have gotten you extra time on that group that were minutes behind you at the halfway mark. Did you also kind of pay attention to kind of where everyone was at that point from on that next turnaround or the second out and back?
Yeah, I counted the time at every turnaround. I think uh, just to check, but it
Mm-hmm.
was a fun thing to do when I was like alone or like meeting other slower 50 milers, 100 milers, and
Mm-hmm.
was cheering them on. But it was a fun thing to do to check where the competitors were during the whole race. So
Yeah, that's an interesting point too, because it is one of those things where like although Tunnel Hill, as far as flat runnable courses go, isn't the most boring, monotonous of them all, but it is still a lot of the same thing over and over again. So you have to find things to occupy your mind to some degree, outside of just kind of the pursuit itself. And I do think kind of it offers that unique element where you can sort of gauge on a couple key points of the course where everyone else is. And like you said, there's a ton of people out there running it. So you get to see where everyone else is at, encourage one another, and kind of gain a little momentum from everyone else out there chasing their own goals on it.
yeah, exactly.
So for me, it's always been a kind of a pivotal spot on that course when you come through that start finish area at what's like I think between 76 and 77 miles, or right before that last out and back up the tunnel hill and back. When you came through there, what were you thinking at that point? Because I find like at that spot you kind of have this sort of one or the other situation of, I feel like I've done this right, and I think now I can kind of just put the finishing touches on this if I don't make any mistakes. things will be fine and confidence kind of builds versus I may have overreached a little bit. I got to really focus and hope for the best. Where was your mind at that point?
Uh, at that point, I started to feel like I have run a long way, but I was still in a good mood and a good confidence. But I felt like the pace was slowly getting slower. So uh, I really didn't. I felt like I had it, but this last out and back will be harder. Like from until here, it's been easy, but now it's like just do the last out and back as good as I can. So the uphill until Tunnel Hill was where I maybe lost a little bit more than I wanted, but I tried to focus on well, I still have the downhill left, so I focus on try to get back some pace uh, during the downhill, and it worked out pretty well, I think.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I would say that's how it looked watching the live stream too. When you came through the start finish for that final out and back, my thought was Elov will have to really blow up to not break 12 hours. And if he keeps it together, we could see a historically fast time in general, not just on the course at Tunnel Hill. Was there a point on that out and back where you started thinking, if I can really keep this thing going, I'm going to be able to go under 11 and a half hours? Was that ever on your mind during the day? Was that a goal going in? Or was that something that was sort of presented itself at a certain point in the race and you thought, this is on the table now?
Uh, the main goal going in outwards was to break the course record and the Swedish record, and potentially or to go under 12 hours. But I also was thinking more and aiming the paces for like sub 11 and a half hours. I was thinking that on if I get the best day, I have the potential to go under 11:30. So we I wrote on my bottles. I wrote the time stamps for 11:30 pace. So I looked at my bottles and saw how I was doing for going for the 11:30. So I think the last time at Tunnel Hill, I think I had a little bit more than 2 minutes on 11:30. Maybe it wasn't that perfect timestamp for the station, but somewhere close. So I had 11:30 in mind during the whole race.
Hmm. That's a good idea to put it on your bottles so that you're just grabbing them at the right time and only thinking about that split when it becomes appropriate. Um, was there a point when you were kind of coming back down towards the finish line where you were like, all right, I can empty the tank now? Or was it just kind of like, keep doing what I'm doing, focus on the next mile at a time, and let's see where we get to when you hit the finish line?
I was on my way up to Tunnel Hill. I was afraid pushing it too hard too early. But when from Tunnel Hill the last time and down, I tried to push it all I could because then I felt like the finish line is close. I feel like how much I have in the tank left, so I can push it uh, after how I feel what I have left. I will not bonk the last couple of kilometers. I know maybe with the 4.5 kilometers left, I think uh, I really started pushing the last drops out.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to feel how much I could push it during the last 15K.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At one point, did you, on the way down, see where second place was and think to yourself, I'm really putting together a solid race here relative to the rest of the field.
Yeah, I said I was saying hi to Phil when I met him. So and then I clocked him like almost an hour behind. And so then uh, but I always felt like I had something good going on. So it didn't really matter how the other was doing. I always felt like I have something really special going on here the whole race.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that because my perception with some of these flat 100 milers, a lot of times you do find yourself, especially by the end of it, that you're essentially just time trialing because you're far enough ahead of whoever's behind you that you could really slow down and still manage to get the win. But obviously, your goal is to put together a really strong race and maximize your finishing time. Is having that that A target, because it sounds like sub 11 and a half hours was your A target. It's just very much there and almost as like a rabbit for you to chase. How important did you find that staying intact all day long to keeping that focus going since you did sort of turn it into a one-man race by the end?
Uh, yeah, I think the main goal for the race was to go for a time rather than racing. Uh, it was helpful to see other guys going out fast. It really helped. Like it's not just me; it's other guys pushing their limits. So it really helped with the moral for it. So, but I think our main goal was going there to do something special with the time wise, and uh, and see if anybody else is keeping up with me, and if there's a race going on. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting just in retrospect kind of thinking about just what all goes through your mind during these races. I find the hardest question sometimes to answer is like what were you thinking the entire time? Because I find like there are certain things that really just cement themselves in your head that maybe you were just thinking about on repeat a lot during the day. And then there's just inevitably a ton of things that probably went through your mind that is just sort of passive where you're never going to recall it, but in the moment it was there. And it kind of becomes a little bit of a blur from all that. But when you cross the finish line, under 11 and a half hours, new course record, fastest non-road surface course or record in the world that we've documented. What was your initial emotions crossing that finish line? What were you thinking?
I think I said it in the camera. I think I said I was done for the day, and that was
Yeah.
what I was feeling. I'm done, and that was unbelievably satisfying.
Yeah, no doubt. How important is it for you when you have a race like that where you look back and you see how just really perfect, I would say, to most the most degree your splits were, in terms of just confirming to yourself that I didn't really leave a lot out, or I didn't leave a lot on the table, or I really kind of found my best self that day, or was there spots where you thought, hey, if I could have done this a little differently, maybe I would have run even faster?
No, I think I had. I haven't found any really bad situations during the race. I think I had a really solid race. I did some conscious things like when I started thinking about the outcome of the race, I told myself, not now. Right now, I want to be here, not in the future. Like I'm here and now. I think I also said it out loud to myself to not be in the future. So, so I think I managed to do all the things right. I had the nutrition plan out perfect, and my stomach was good. The temperature was perfect, and yeah, I think I like it started to get harder during then, but it is a lot of miles in my legs, so it's not weird. It's hard to do a negative split for 100 miles, I think. You should be able to get close, but it's hard to get the negative split uh, for 100 miles.
Hmm. It's definitely hard. Yeah, it's one of the things. The way I describe it is, I would say like a very small margin to either side of even is probably going to be like the optimal operating zone, and it's not necessarily clear to me if that is slightly positive or slightly negative that you're necessarily going to be faster than the other. I think it's like staying within that kind of relatively tight zone of even is going to probably be what suggests you kind of really executed well. But who knows, really? It's like the sport is still kind of learning some of these things to a large degree. So it's fun to talk to people like yourself who've had, races that have gone great like this one, and then maybe ones that haven't. So you kind of have an idea of where that edge is for yourself and what suggests what out there during it. You mentioned your fueling. I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about kind of the protocol that you used in terms of what were you actually taking in during the day. Did you kind of calculate the amount of grams of carbohydrate or fuel that you took in throughout the course of the day, and that sort of stuff, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I was aiming for uh, 85 grams of carbs an hour, uh, split by sports drink and gels. So I had every time I got my support, I got a bottle. Maybe during the longer sections, I got 50 centiliters of sports drinks and a gel. And during the shorter sections, I got 250 milliliters of sports drink, a little bit easier, and a gel. So I just used carbs for my nutrition for the race, and then I had caffeine every third hour, I think.
Do you remember how much caffeine you were taking in at any given time or during those 3 hour intervals?
Yeah, I had about it's a shot from my sponsor, so it's actually a pre-workout shot uh, that is 250 milligrams. So it's quite a lot, but
Hey folks, just a quick reminder that this episode's sponsors are Element Electrolytes and Delta G Ketones. You can get a free sample pack of Element Electrolytes by going to drinkelementT.com/HPO and 20% off your order of Delta G Ketones by going to deltagketones.com and entering promo code BITTER20. Yeah. Well, you're spreading it out to 3 hours. You're metabolizing caffeine a lot faster when you're running a sub 7 minute mile pace all day long.
yeah,
So there is that. The funny thing is they do suggest like 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight is kind of the performance dose of caffeine. And from my own experience and with others, I find that there's sort of two options. One is to lean into that actual number, which you're probably on the high end of that 3 to 6 milligrams, just with kind of if my math is accurate, but you're within it. If you're going to do that, you just need to be careful about how frequently you do it, because you can't be doing that every hour.
no,
But if you're spreading out every 3 hours, you're probably getting, you're probably staying in that zone. I've had other people who are maybe just a little more sensitive to caffeine. They'll take that idea of 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, and they'll kind of target a total that is probably similar to what you ended up taking in during that day, but they're spreading it out a little more throughout that 3 hours. So rather than having it all at once, they maybe are having like 70 to 80 milligrams every hour for that 3 hours, and then kind of just repeating that. And from what I gather, like, it tends to be kind of a little bit of a personal experience thing, because there is a range in terms of how people respond to caffeine. But for what it's worth, you kind of proved your method to work well for you, because it's hard to imagine that you felt like that was a deterrent at all during the day, given kind of how things played out.
yeah.
I'm curious how you arrived at 85 grams of carbohydrate. Is that something that you've just tested in training and racing in the passed and found I can get up to 85 grams and not have a large risk of stomach distress. So I'm going to go for 85 milligrams, or is there something else that you've done that would suggest that that's a good target for you to do for something like Tunnel Hill?
Uh, I usually I've done more of the 100K races during the last years, and I uh, there I aiming for 100 grams an hour because of the higher speed. But I think when you do a 100 mile, you go down to a lower pace and you be more of fat burning. So that was the reason I got down from 100 grams to 85 grams. And you're also doing it for a longer period of time, so you have to have a good stomach for a longer time because during the 100K races it's a risk that you got problem with your stomach during the end, and especially during the end, I think. But uh, it's a margin where you can try to push it a little bit. But I think the reason was that it's 11 and a half hours, and it's better to for my stomach to be at peace than try to push it too hard. And I think my stomach is pretty good with carbs during racing. So
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. Did so at no point during the race you were feeling like I may have a stomach issue. It's kind of on edge. It was just pretty smooth all day long for you.
yeah, I I might got some feeling like oh maybe a little bit too much now, but then I got really some periods where I didn't get anything in, so my stomach got to recover from that. So it was okay. It was some parts where I took a lot of the sports drink at the same time, so it was kind of a gambling. But
Yeah.
then I got some time to recover from it, so it was okay. So it never got to an issue. So
Yeah, I find that that is one of the issues that I think most people have when it comes to fueling. It can sometimes be, it's less of that they did too much overall and more that they did too much in one period of time and they kind of gave themselves a little too much to kind of to balance, and that's what causes a lot of that kind of bottlenecking in the digestive tract versus if you're just kind of like, which just sounds like what you were doing for the most part is just kind of like nibbling on your gels and sipping on your sports drink. So you're just sort of slow trickling it in, but at that 85 gram per hour frequency. And that probably is when you're feeling the best, I would imagine.
yeah, I tried to get a little bit of a bigger sip every maybe 20 to 30 minutes. So so I almost every time I got something in, I had a period of time to recover from it as well. So I think it was a good strategy.
Do you ever do solid foods in races that are longer than, say, 11 and a half hours, or are you typically just gels and sports drinks no matter what?
Yeah, I can use bars, and sometimes I have used real food as well during 24 hours races and mountain races like the UTCT 100 miles last year. I think I didn't eat any food then, but I ate a couple of bars, I think.
Is there a duration where you start thinking, or maybe it's an intensity where you start thinking, all right, this is where I can start including solid foods to the protocol versus a race like Tunnel Hill where you're like, there's probably no reason for me to be doing a solid food option when I'm running these paces for this duration?
Yeah, it is easier to eat more solid food when going slower, absolutely. But I haven't got any good experience with the eating, especially real food. I'm almost always get some stomach issues after eating something like that. I think my stomach is best with the sports drink during races overall.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page as you with that. I know, like, when I ran 11:19 for 100 miles, it was all liquid. Most of my races that are under 12 hours, it's I've done some where I've introduced some like crackers and things like that. But I find that that's the thing I get the least tolerant of as the day progresses. And as long as I'm not getting kind of just nauseated from the liquids and the more chewable type stuff, like the gels or the gummy type things, I tend to go that direction as the primary part. It's when you start getting into like 15, 16, 17, 18 hours is where I think sometimes then it's like the intensity is low enough where some solid food, or maybe it's just you're out there so long, you just start getting to a point where your stomach's like, give me something with a contrast to it. Give me something crunchy, salty, savory. And you find yourself like wandering over into an aid station looking for that versus something else, or planning for it in the best of cases. I'd be curious too, because I do want to kind of transition a little bit because you have so much more to your career than just the roads and the tracks and the fast routes. You came over to the United States in, I believe it was 2018, and mixed it up with some fast locals for the Black Canyon 100K, and ended up getting yourself a golden ticket, which is an automatic entry into the Western States 100. And then you came over. I'm not sure if you actually, maybe you stayed that whole time, but you may have gone back to Sweden between, but you ran Western States, which are, when we pair that with, you said Ultra Trail Cape Town, those are races that most are going to consider trail, ranging from runnable trail at Black Canyon all the way up to real mountain trail when you're at Ultra Trail Cape Town. I'd love to hear like your perspective of that side of the sport versus the more runnable stuff, and then maybe a little bit by how you decide when to do one versus the other.
Yeah, it was in 2017 I ran the Black Canyon to get the golden ticket. Uh, and it's I do it by what I feel like to do when I choose my races. So it is a little bit depending on, have I done too much roads recently? I might get the, like, now I want some more adventurous stuff because I think it's more of an adventure going for a mountain race than it is a road race. So it's and especially during training, you go out in nature and you can try new trails and you still get good training in, and like uh, it's more of a fun training, if you say. But I think also I really like the road running as well, because I get more confident in the road running training than in my mountain running training, because I'm a better road runner than mountain runner, I think. Uh, and I have to go for the longer stuff to get competitive, I think.
Yeah, my experience maps what you said perfectly. I always find that there's a point where uh, I'm like you, I'm more confident on the runnable stuff in terms of I can see the splits, I can see the development, and when I'm standing on a starting line of that, I feel like I can trust it a little bit better. And that does get like kind of boring and monotonous enough over time where even if physically I'm probably capable of going through another training cycle and racing a flat runnable course, there's like this mental reset where you can kind of just like take a break from the more exact splits and just the repetitive monotony of running flat things all the time, and going out and, like you said, going out for like an adventure or an exploration, or stretching your long run out a little bit further because you're doing a little bit more hiking and less one-dimensional type movements.
No.
And then when I come back to like doing something more runnable after that, I feel like I feel like I've just given my brain an off season where it feels kind of refreshed and energized and excited to start doing some of that stuff that I was starting to get bored with before that.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a balance there, it sounds. After, I mean, Ultra Vasen, that race has changed a little bit over the years, if I'm not mistaken, to where when it started, it was very much more runnable, but now I think there's a little more trail aspect to that race now. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, especially this year they changed the start to usually you go up on a dirt road, the first thing that happens, and now they uh, draw it another section, so you're going up a bigger hill instead, and run more trails for the first I think 12K. Uh, and especially this year, we in the front pack took a wrong turn after
Oh, no.
7K, so we ran an extra 4 kilometers, but managed to bounce back in the end. Uh, so especially this year, the time is really off for the compare it for earlier years, and it also was already 2K longer than earlier. So it's earlier it was 90K. It should have been 92K this year, but it got to 96K. So it's this year was a little bit weird, I think.
Yeah, I'm curious as to after your after Ultravas and then you parlayed that into your training for Tunnel Hill and then the race at Tunnel Hill. Do you suspect you've got some trails in your future, or are you hungry to go and do some more flat running for your next build up, or have you even gotten to that point of deciding yet?
No, no, not. I'm not decided on my next race. I definitely think I will do more of the runnable stuff in the future, but also uh, go to run the trails. I think I will keep on going for both, uh, but I think I have the most potential in the flatter stuff.
Cool. I know we talked a little bit in the beginning about World 100 Kilometer Championships, and I don't believe they've announced yet where it's going to be hosted next year, but it is on the calendar for next year. Do you have a qualifier yet? Or actually, maybe I should ask, how do you decide on the team in Sweden? I know in the United States, there's like standards you hit that they usually prioritize, but there's also some races that they look at too very favorably in terms of selecting a six-person team. How does that process work in Sweden?
I think they usually have a time to run for the 100 miles, uh, or they that you should do some races that is similar that proves you can do a good 100K race. So it depends a little bit when you are doing the races as well. You have to, if you haven't done a 100K race just now, uh, you have to like, and they know your potential. Then you have to show your fitness in some way else, somehow. So usually they maybe look at the Swedish Championship on the 100K to see who's able to, or who fits for the 100 World Champs. Uh, and then it's,
Interesting. So are
yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to ask, so is that something you think you'll probably try to do next year, assuming it happens?
Yeah, I think so. I really want to have a strong team during 100K World Champs, and I've got unlucky the last couple of times because we have been either we have been just two people finishing, or just two people going to the race, like two men. So I haven't been running a team race in the World Champs yet. So I really think we have guys who can qualify for the 100K that is uh, who can do a really good 100K. We had this year's Swedish champion ran a 6:30, and we also had the week before Tunnel Hill another guy who was second at the Swedish champs, who broke the Swedish 6-hour record in. He ran 94.45K for 6 hours, which is comparable for Jonas' Swedish record on 100K if he had continued running in the same pace. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it sounds like you are really starting to get excited about a potential team. Those times would suggest with your 6.5 hour, perhaps faster potential now in the 100K that you could put together a very, very competitive team that would definitely be looking at a podium position if all of you end up running in the mid 6 hours on championship day. I do. You mentioned Jonas, and Jonas is one of those guys who, when I think of Swedish ultra marathon runners, his name comes up at the top of my mind often because he's had a long history at the World Championships. I believe, and you can probably correct me if I'm wrong, he's been second there either 3 or 4 times and first once, but has also competed quite well at the Comrades Marathon, which is a very good suggestive performance in terms of how you'll probably do it, like a 100 kilometer type distance. What was it like kind of getting into ultra running, having someone like that as like the more or less kind of the representative of ultra running for Sweden?
yeah, he was the guy that was the inspiration when I started coming into ultra running, because it was just the time when he did second place at Comrades, and also getting those good competitive world champs, and also did great at trail running. So he was an inspiration when I started ultra running, and then when I started building up and getting better, we also started to get to meet here and there. We ended up doing Western States at the same year. So uh, I got home after Black Canyon, and we two together got back for the Western States uh, trail camps. So we tried the course together, and then also got to live together during the race, the days before the race, and so he's become a good friend, and also been an inspiration for me, in especially during my early years in the ultra running.
Yeah, I bet. The one thing I always think of when I think of Jonas too is the year he won the world championships. He did this. I think this was the first or second, probably the second year Ultravassen was an event, and back then it was still off road, but it was a very runnable 90 kilometers. And he ran a split on that race that was suggestive of just world class ultra marathon running that I think will unfortunately get somewhat lost in the history books because of the way the course has changed over the years and just the way that things get focused on. It was like 4 weeks before World Championships, and he ended up winning World Championships anyway. But I believe he said that he probably still had a little bit of ultravasen in his legs on race day at World Championships that year. So, did you ever kind of comb through his splits at ultravasen that year and look at just how fast that actually was?
Yeah, it was an insane race of him. Especially the second half, I think, was when he just went off. Like, or it was just like he left the other ones behind. I think it was Max King racing that year, who
Mm-hmm.
was second. I think he stopped to change shoes or something, and then Jonas just took off. He put
Yeah.
some really fast splits after the halfway point, and then just dropped Max from the race.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that might have been Max. I'm pretty sure he was there that year. I know I've heard stories of Patrick Reagan changing his socks at one point during Ultravassen. and getting some heat for that because like I think he was new enough to the sport where he thought like this is just something you're supposed to do. And everyone's like, no, 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 Pat. Like if you feel good, leave the socks on.
Yeah. It's happened a couple of times. I think. I think it was the 2 first years because I think the same thing happened. I think was it Steve Way the first year that
Yeah.
got dropped by Jonas at the same spot, and then I, I'm pretty sure it was Max King in 2015. But I don't know if Pat Regan have been there like 3 times, I think, and he's been like second, third, or something. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, but I don't know
Yeah.
which years. 2017, I know because he was the guy I was battling with when I won.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a fun event to follow and one that I've been wanting to go to and just have never actually got around to putting it on my calendar for racing yet, despite it kind of being on my radar for quite some time now. But um, I guess I can. I mean, we can talk about other things if you want to share anything, but I would also like to just kind of touch on how you go about recovering from a race like Tunnel Hill, where you spend a lot of physical and mental energy in the training, and then you have a race like you did. You probably feel like you need maybe a little bit more mental recovery from the whole experience, traveling internationally, jet lag, just kind of giving yourself enough time to feel like you're ready to kind of go through those paces again. What do you have a protocol for post race recovery, or is it very intuitive based on kind of how your body and mind are feeling from one day to the next?
uh, it depends a little bit what's next, and when this is the last race of the season, I'm a little bit more relaxed how I recover. I usually try to sleep as much as I can, or at least as much as I feel I need to. Uh, and Otherwise, I try to get running, or if I need to do something other thing like cross training, I do that. But I don't have a specific plan after the race. I should do that and that and that. And I usually do go by feel, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, I always tell people with running, it's kind of weird because there are things that would look very subjective that are actually probably better measures of whether you're doing something right or wrong. And one of those things I think is recovery, where your body kind of knows when it's fatigued and it knows when it's ready to go, and it will tell you that if you're really good at paying attention to it. And I would imagine someone who's been around for as long as you have, you've gotten pretty good at looking and finding those signals of when it's time to kind of start ramping things back up again and when it's better just to leave it on pause for a little bit longer.
Yeah, yeah, it's really different from time to time. So this time I think I really got everything out of me. So I believe I can be a sore for especially mentally, uh, a couple of weeks after.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, Elov, it's been great to catch up, hear about your world class performance at the Tunnel Hill 100 Mile, as well as some of the other races that you've done in the past. Before I let you go, if you want to let the listeners know where they can find you, if you have a website or social media handles and things like that, feel free to share them. And then I will also include those in the show notes.
Yeah, it's the only thing is I use Instagram for most of my stuff. So it's Elov Olsson, and also my gang from Ockelbo Mafian. So Ockelbo Mafian at Instagram, and Elov Olsson at Instagram as well.
Perfect. And that's Olsson, Olsson, for those of you who are going to look it up and not head to the show notes where it will be linked. So, Elov, thanks again for coming on. I look forward to seeing what you do next, and I wish you the best in the recovery off-season part of your career.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone, if you're still here, you're sticking around to hear about how I use the show sponsor Element Electrolytes and Delta G ketones For Element, they make an electrolyte supplement. So what I know about me is that I lose 614 milligrams of electrolytes per liter of fluid loss. So what that means is if I go out for a run and I lose 2 liters of sweat, then I'm also going to lose roughly 1,228 milligrams of electrolytes with it, which ironically happens to be about 1 packet of Element. So what I likely will do is if I'm going out for a longer training session or I'm going to be out in the heat and sweating a lot, I'm going to supplement the fluid intake I have with electrolyte to make sure I have that stuff in balance. The way this usually looks for me is I'll wake up in the morning and I'll have a cup of coffee and I'll put half of one of those packets in with my coffee. It will be one of their chocolate flavors though, because it's coffee after all. I'm not going to stick one of the fruity flavors in there. So that gets me kicked off. Then what happens is I go out for the workout and then I am drinking basically to thirst, but I am also targeting some numbers at times when it's hot enough and I know what my sweat loss is. But generally speaking, for every liter of fluid I'm taking in, I'm matching that with 614 milligrams of electrolytes to make sure I'm staying on top of that and remaining hydrated throughout that training session. If you're interested in a deep dive and figuring out more about your fluid loss and electrolyte needs, I actually have a couple podcast episodes that might be interesting to you. One is episode 358 with Andy Blow, where I go over all things hydration. And he talks about how I came up with that 614 milligram loss number and how you can maybe find out about yours, as well as how much fluid you are losing with some simple at-home tests. Also, I did an episode a while back, episode 300, which is just titled Personalizing Workout Hydration. So check out both of those if you're interested in doing a deep dive into your hydration and electrolyte needs. Something new I added to my training and racing this year are exogenous ketones. The research for exogenous ketones is still in its early stages, but there is a lot coming out and it is getting more convincing in my opinion to the degree where I wanted to try it out. I actually stress tested it during a 15-hour, 100-mile run at the Rocky Raccoon 100 earlier this year as a way to confirm whether it was something I was going to include in my racing protocol. One thing I was a little nervous about with exogenous ketones, like I am with anything I'm ingesting during an ultramarathon, is what is it going to do to digestion. I was interested in the recovery research for some time now with exogenous ketones, and there are some newer research studies now that suggest it could also have some performance applications as well, if you're able to tolerate it and get it in the right dose. So when I decided to try it out, I went with delta G ketones because they are the ketone ester that basically all the research that has promising effects is tied to, and it's their formula that's being used in those research studies. So a lot of times you'll just go and look for an exogenous ketone, and there's all sorts of potential issues with that, whether it's a dosage or just an incorrect type, and it's not actually going to do what the research suggests it would do. So to me, it was looking at if I want to potentially get the benefits that these could be bringing, I need to be using the one that they're actually showing the research with. So that was delta G ketones. They actually received the DARPA funding and grant to actually put together that formula. So like I said in the intro message, they have 50 plus published studies and are part of 20 plus ongoing studies. My protocol with this right now, and this is something where I am evolving as I kind of do more with it, but at the moment, I'll do a bottle of their ketone performance, Delta G performance, and that is their little blue bottle. So I'll take one of those about 20 minutes before a big key training session, and that's it. If it's a race day though, I'll do that same protocol, but I will take another bottle about every 3 hours after that. So if I'm doing something that's longer duration, like that 15-hour Rocky Raccoon effort I just described, I would be doing that again at 3, 6, 9, and 12 during that particular performance. So like I said in the intro, if you want to chat with one of their experts, you can actually go to deltagketones.com, and they have a consultation service there right now where they will help you understand the research and whether your lifestyle is even something that they would be worth considering it for. So if you want to get a little more information on that, that option is available to you. Links to both Delta G ketones and Element electrolytes can be found in the show notes, as well as at zachbitter.com/HPO sponsors. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter.